The New Orleans Saints pull off a huge trade weeks ahead of the NFL draft. What I think they could do with their newly found draft capital, what I think they should do, and 2 new 4-round mock drafts with the updated draft order. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I am your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today's Saints Wire. Locked On NFL on Tuesdays, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Head over to rockauto.com, let them know that Locked On sent you. So, the New Orleans Saints pull off a very aggressive move that I think is an absolute win for this team. Yes, you can complain about future draft picks being given up. I don't care. I couldn't care less about future draft picks. If the intent for the New Orleans Saints is to fill their holes in their roster right now with talent that they know is in the draft this year, then they did exactly what they needed to do in order to be able to do that, making a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles that, after it's all said and done, gets them picks 16 and 19 in the first round, costing them their current first rounder, a third rounder, as well as some future picks, which include next year's 2023 first round pick, and then a third round pick for the year after that. But again, I don't care. I don't care about the draft capital that they gave up in the future. None of that matters because we're talking about now. And what this does is that it gives the New Orleans Saints an opportunity now to have every option available to them in this year's draft. And it's very clear, right? It's very clear that the New Orleans Saints like the draft class this year at positions where they, what did Darian call them the other day? Positions of interest for the New Orleans Saints. Shout out to Darian Gray, Locked on HBCU. That gives the New Orleans Saints every option that they need. Now that they have both picks 16 and 19 in the first round, while holding on to pick 98, while holding on to their second round pick 49, they've got pick 120 still. They still have a lot of opportunity here to be able to fill out as many different holes as they need to on this or in this NFL draft class. So let's talk about the different ways that they can do that, right? This gives the Saints 2 top 20 selections, gives them 3 top 50 selections, gives them 4 top 100 selections, 5 top 120 selections. That means that if you look at the positions of interest, right, the positions of need that remain, which to me include 5 positions: offensive line, wide receiver, quarterback, and offensive line being offensive tackle, right? Wide receiver, quarterback, interior defensive line, and safety, right? 5 positions, 5 top 120 selections. That's a really good place to be, as well as $19 million still left to spend in free agency if they want to. So let's just focus down real quick on the first round pick. 16, 19. New Orleans Saints now have 2 first round selections. What could they do with those picks? They've got 3 main options, right? The easiest thing for them to do is just stand pat at 16 and 19, walk away with 2 of those 5 positions. They could walk away particularly with 2 of their top 3 needs: wide receiver, offensive tackle, and quarterback, should they choose to be, enthralled at all or tempted at all with this quarterback class. They could walk away with a collection of guys like, let's say, if they went with Kenny Pickett at the very beginning, right? They could walk away with Trevor Penning in the first round. Any of those wide receivers: Jameson Williams, Drake London, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks. Hell, they could walk away with 2 of those players if they wanted to, if the board didn't fall their way. But they could stand pat at 16 and 19 and walk away with 2 big time gets and 2 big time immediate impact players before selecting again in the middle of the second round at pick 49. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded up again at that point too. If they're going to be this aggressive 3 weeks before the NFL draft, I expect that they'll be aggressive during the NFL draft as well. Okay, that's option 1. That's the easy route, right? Now they could do something a little bit more difficult, and maybe that most people won't like, but hey, it's about the team and what they want and what they like. They could package 16 and 19 to move up into the top 10 and grab, let's say, Malik Willis, right? You're not going to move up for Kenny Pickett. You're not going to move up for Matt Corral. You're not going to move up for those guys. I don't think you should, at least. Malik Willis is really the only quarterback in this draft that's barely worth a top 10 selection, and it's just because he's part of this draft class. Is he a good quarterback? Absolutely, yes. He's my favorite quarterback of this draft class. However, I don't know that the New Orleans Saints will do that. Now, it would make sense, right? Because of the future draft capital. They basically gave up a quarterback in the 2023 draft class by giving up their first round pick. But if they want to get back in the first round next year, they'll do it, right? The other option here is that you can still walk away with a quarterback in this year's draft class without taking one in the first round. Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, Matt Corral, so on and so forth. So that's another option, though. The Saints could move up and try to grab Malik Willis, get ahead of him. They'd have to get ahead of the Atlanta Falcons, maybe even ahead of the Carolina Panthers in order to do that. Again, that's probably the road that I see them traveling the least, but it is there. It is a possibility, and we should talk about all possibilities. And the third option could be, and this would be an interesting one because the Saints haven't done this since 2007, but the all too rare trade back for the New Orleans Saints. For instance, the Saints could stand pat at 16, but then trade back from 19 and either help a team that has an early second round pick, but wants to get back in the first round pick, get back into the first round. You have a team that's late in the first round that wants to get to the middle of the first round. You could take advantage of a time, draft day, when draft capital is at its absolute highest, which is one of the reasons why I love that the New Orleans Saints made this move weeks ahead of the NFL draft, because now they weren't in a situation to where you have all these other teams that are trying to move up. When the Philadelphia Eagles have 3 picks, they would have been an obvious trade partner for so many of the back half of the NFL draft. Now, the Saints ended up leaving themselves out of the whole auctioneering portion of the potential NFL draft, getting 2 selections in the first round. So now that we've talked about all the different things that the New Orleans Saints could do, which, by the way, the Saints could also do something completely different as well, right? They could move up again. They could move up some more without giving up 16 or move up some more without giving up 19. There's a couple of different things they could also do. It's Mickey Loomis. We know they're going to be aggressive. But let's talk about now what the New Orleans Saints should do. That's what we're going to break down next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline, the best, easiest, fastest place for you to place all of your bets and to get in on all of your sports wagering, sports betting needs. Just head over to betonline.net. They've got all the information that you need, whether you're looking for news and analysis, you're looking for podcasts, whatever it might be. Even if you're just looking for stuff on this week's Masters champions, you're looking for something before the Monday night. I'm recording this on Monday, so maybe you're hearing this a little bit early and you want to get in ahead of the NCAA Men's Championship. Shout out South Carolina for winning that women's title, by the way. Everything that you need is there for you over at betonline.net. They're your continued source for all things sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device so that you can get in on all of the trends in action. It's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. As always, I appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day every day here on the show. Make sure you go and check out that Locked On NFL YouTube page and Locked On NFL podcast as well. Luke Braun and I are going to be breaking down this trade some more from the national perspective, and you'll get maybe a different perspective on it too. I love this trade. Luke may not, you may not, so make sure you go and check out the Locked On NFL podcast for that perspective as well. Okay, so let's talk about, we broke down what the Saints could do, right? All of the different options, all the different possibilities that are there now that they have 2 first-round selections in this year's draft. Now, we'll slow it down a little bit, and we'll talk a bit about what I think the Saints should do. And I think they should stand pat at 16. Tony Pauline, Pro Football Network, one of the best in the business when it comes to the NFL draft and understanding what's going on, what teams are thinking and all that, said that the New Orleans Saints are looking to walk out of the first round with a quarterback and a wide receiver. That's great. That's fine. You know why? Because they walk away with a wide receiver. That's why it's great. I don't care that they want a quarterback, right? As long as they walk away with a wide receiver, that's fantastic. And I think you might agree with that. Because you can also find good tackles in the second and third rounds, which the Saints still have selections in. Let me remind you, 3 top 50 selections, 4 top 100 selections, because the third round pick that they had in this trade was 101, not 98. So they're in a really, really good position here to be able to still add a tackle in day 2, especially if they feel very comfortable starting James Hurst going into this year's week 1, which would make a ton of sense for them. So I think they should stand pat. And at 16 and 19, you can grab a quarterback and a wide receiver. You can grab a wide receiver and then a quarterback, whatever it is that you want to do. Now, obviously, it makes a lot of sense to grab the quarterback first because quarterback will be the first one off the board. But that's maybe where the Saints could do something a little bit more creative than what we named in the, in that earlier portion of the show where we talked about what it is they could do. They could also move up with a minor jump from 16 to 12, 16 to 11, something like that, that allows them to make sure that they get that first round quarterback if, let's say, Kenny Pickett is the guy, for instance, right? Malik Willis is really the only one you're going to package both of those picks to move up into the first round for. So if Kenny Pickett is the target, then maybe you want to make a trade with the Jets at 10 so that you can hold on to or get ahead of the Washington Commanders. But the Commanders might actually be fine at this point because they have Carson Wentz, and so they don't feel the need to go and grab somebody from this quarterback class. So honestly, staying at 16 might help them do it. But if they need to move up, then you're talking about trading 16 and maybe the third round pick to get up a couple more spots. 16, maybe the second round pick to get into the top 10 if you need to do that, right? Late into the top 10. But you don't necessarily have to package 16 and 19 in order to move up. That's just not a reality anymore for the Saints. They don't have to do that. So it gives them an opportunity to hold on to 19, one pick later than they were already set to draft, and still walk away with a top wide receiver in this year's class, but then fill the need at quarterback that maybe they have. And I'm really not sure they have it, right? Remember, this happened last year too. All the conversation was around Mac Jones and how much the New Orleans Saints loved him and that they wanted to get up into the top 10 to grab him. But then all of a sudden they were getting up into the top 10 for J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain, and then they stood pat at 27 and took Peyton Turner after it was all said and done with. So what do we really know? You know what I mean? The New Orleans Saints are the only ones that know what their plans are. So at this point, what we need to focus on is the fact that they have every option available to them. That's the big piece. But if they stand pat at 16 and 19, I think personally that maximizes the impact you're able to have with this year's draft class. Were not big spenders in free agency, even though they had the money to do it. To me, that means that they like this draft class. The fact that they went from having one selection in the first round to having two selections in the first round and doing it in such a way to where they held on to their second round pick, held on to their third round pick, it means they like this year's draft class. So if you're going to like this year's draft class, then stick with 16 and 19. That's what makes the most sense. So I would not be surprised to see the New Orleans Saints do that and then be able to effectively solve, right? With draft capital, not money, with draft capital, holes on your roster. That's a great place to be. And you still have $19 million available to you in free agency. But if you want to go after Tyrann Mathieu, you can go after Tyrann Mathieu. Or if you just want to sign the draft class, sign your undrafted free agents, fill the training camp roster, and then roll over the rest of that money to 2023 so it puts you in a better situation with your salary cap next year, I ain't mad at that either. The New Orleans Saints have every option available to them, but they can maximize it if they stay pat, if they stand and stay put where they are at 16 and 19 and walk away with two top prospects at positions of need. I'm going to show you how that works now. Enough just flapping my gums about it. Let's do it, right? Let's not just talk about it. Let's be about it. 2 fourth-round mock drafts. We're going to take a look at what happens if the Saints go offensive tackle and wide receiver, and what happens if the Saints go quarterback and wide receiver, and how you can still get an offensive tackle to develop behind James Hurst in either situation. We've got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And we've also got Rock Auto, the absolute best website in the world aside from LockedOnPodcasts.com. Come at me. No, I'm serious. Rock Auto is awesome. They're great. I want to give you an example. Okay, I had a friend of mine who backed up, hit their side view mirror on a pillar, right? Didn't mess up the car or anything like that, but needed to replace the side view mirror. Was going to go to a local place to get it all taken care of. Was going to pay multiple hundreds of dollars to get it done, a few $100. Instead, told them about rockauto.com. They were able to go on, get the side view mirror assembly for like $60. Labor was like $60, saved a couple $100 instead of spending a couple $100. Doesn't get any better than that. And that can happen over and over and over again by visiting rockauto.com. Because you are a do-it-yourselfer, it doesn't mean you have to pay more. You can pay professional wholesale prices over at rockauto.com and save yourself some cash, sometimes 30, 50, 70% less than what you're going to pay over with those chain stores. So go and check them out, rockauto.com. Don't forget to let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, family, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with 2 fourth-round mock drafts. We're going to stay put at pick 16 and 19, but we're going to go two different routes so that you can see how the Saints can maximize the opportunity that they have with these new selections. So I want to start off taking a look at what it looks like if the Saints go at 16 with an offensive tackle, 19 at wide receiver. So this is what I ended up coming up with. At pick number 16 in the first round, Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa. We know he fits a lot of what the New Orleans Saints like. At pick number 19, just a couple picks later, Chris Olave, wide receiver, Ohio State. You want a slot receiver? Sure, he can help you out there. You want an outside receiver? Sure, he can help you out there too. Pick number 49, I wanted to still address the fact that just because they traded a first-round pick for next year doesn't mean that they completely have to really like jump for a quarterback this year. Another quarterback that I think the Saints like, Matt Corral out of Mississippi. So I went with Matt Corral at pick 49. You know why? Because you can. Because you've solved the other big problems at 16 and 19. You're not losing anything here. Then I circled around at pick number 98. I addressed the interior defensive line with Phi Mathis. Again, what did I tell you in yesterday's episode? What did I tell you? If you can get an Alabama defensive tackle in the third round, you draft an Alabama defensive tackle in the third round. And then finally, I wrapped up at pick number 120, which is their fourth round selection, with Alec Pierce, because I wanted a big slot guy to go and be able to complement Michael Thomas and Chris Olave, who can both move inside and out. Alec Pierce can move inside and out as well. So this was an example of me double dipping at wide receiver. Instead of going at 120 with Alec Pierce, I could have gone with Velus Jones Jr. He's got the connect with Cody Burns, the Saints' new wide receiver coach. He's also got some return ability, things like that as well. But just goes to show you, even if I don't go with quarterback in the first round, although that's reportedly what the Saints want to do, quarterback, wide receiver, I can still go and find a quarterback that I think the Saints would like that fits a similar mold to some of the guys that we've seen them pursue in the past. Deshaun Watson, who's a mobile guy. I'm not comparing Deshaun Watson and Matt Corral. That's insane from a football perspective and an off-field perspective. But I'm just saying, in terms of these guys that have a little bit of mobility, Taysom Hill, Lamar Jackson, who they really liked, Patrick Mahomes, who has a little bit of mobility, right? If you want somebody that's got a little bit of mobility, Ian Book, right? Absolutely a perfect example of that. Matt Corral's that guy. Now, I don't know that the Saints actually need to go quarterback in this year's draft. They could. I mean, you might as well go with as many quarterbacks as you can, but I'm in no rush, honestly, here. But if they are, let's take a look at the second mock draft, which addresses that to where we go quarterback early. All right, so in this draft, I decided that we were going to go with quarterback first, just seemed to make the most sense. So we went with Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, and this is maybe just the darkest timeline of all, Charles Cross went to the Carolina Panthers and Malik Willis went to the Atlanta Falcons. So didn't have a chance at Malik Willis here, but I went with Kenny Pickett. But we should acknowledge that weird drops happen all the time in the NFL draft. Remember, Lamar Jackson dropped almost out of the first round had it not been for the Baltimore Ravens trading up to select him at the end of the first round. So the Saints are right now in prime position to take advantage of any of those weird drops that could potentially happen. I'm not saying Malik Willis is dropping anytime soon. He's the best quarterback in this class. But if something strange like that happens, the Saints are in really, really good position to be able to take advantage of it now with 16 and 19. But no big drop here. Kenny Pickett was available at 16. So this is my Tony Pauline draft. And I went with Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh. Now, my goals next are to leave the first round with a quarterback and a wide receiver, but then still find some offensive tackle that could start sooner rather than later, but could be a developmental piece. So at 19, I went with Chris Olave, but again, replace him with whatever wide receiver you want. Jameson Williams. That's going to be really confusing if they draft Jameson Williams. Garrett Wilson, Drake London. Pick your favorite wide receiver and sketch their name in there. Next at pick 49 in the second round, again, I want to fill that defensive tackle hole that we still have. So I'm going to go with DeMarvin Leal, the interior defensive lineman from Texas A&M. Needs to put on a little bit of weight, but it's just because maybe Texas A&M used him a lot on the edge as well as on the interior, but he's such a good pass rusher. You want that next to David Onyemata, really, really good as a piece of the rotation as well. Don't need to rely on him for 3 downs all the time throughout the entire drive. You can kind of cycle him in and use him as a bit of a specialist. Then at pick number 98 in the third round, I got my offensive tackle. And I'm happy. Penn State offensive tackle, Rasheed Walker. I love this kid. He's agile. He's got speed. He's got size. He's got a lot of good tools that maybe you don't want to put on the field week 1, but you don't have to. You've got James Hurst. And then if anything were to happen, then you can go to Rasheed Walker if you want to do that. So this is a really, really good example. I'm glad that the board fell this way. This is a really good example of how the Saints if they indeed want to leave the first round with a quarterback and a wide receiver, they're in prime position to be able to do so and still address a couple of needs. Then in the 4th round, to wrap this up, at pick 120, I was able to go with Jelani Woods, the tight end out of Virginia. So there you go. I was able to hit everything there except for safety, but it's okay. I can go safety in the next round. Remember, the Saints also added pick number 194 in this draft, but they also held on to a couple of picks like 161, for instance. So at 161 in the 5th round, I could go to Brian Cook, for instance, out of Cincinnati. I could grab Marquise Bell. There's still so many of these good safeties that you can grab a little bit later. You don't have to be in as much of a rush for them. I also could have traded up. Instead of going interior defensive line at 49, I could have traded up there and gotten Jaquan Brisker at the beginning of the 2nd round and then not really hurt myself at all. I could trade a 2nd and a 4th. I could trade a 2nd and a 5th to be able to do that. So the Saints, again, just maximized every opportunity that they have to absolutely nail this draft and fix a lot of the things that draw a lot of concern for fans and probably the team as well going into 2022. And this is a team right now that when you look around and you look at the moves that they're making, they believe that they can compete here in 2022. It doesn't hurt that the division has taken a huge step back as a whole. Even though Tampa Bay brings back Tom Brady, brings back their roster, they lose Bruce Arians, right? They have Todd Bowles that's going to be there. That's great. He's a very good coach, and we'll see how he works out. But it basically puts them in a similar situation as the New Orleans Saints, just with a better roster. But the Saints, with this NFL draft, can now close the gap a little bit, particularly over on the offensive side, and help themselves over on the defensive side as well. They're well ahead of Atlanta, who pursued Deshaun Watson so hard that they lost Matt Ryan and will now have to turn to Marcus Mariota, or potentially, in this darkest timeline mock draft that I just did, Malik Willis, a rookie quarterback at that point. And then the Carolina Panthers, who now have the longest tenured head coach in the NFC South with Matt Rule, and they're in a situation to where they don't really have a quarterback or an answer at quarterback. Yeah, Sam Darnold is there, but is he really the answer for you? I don't think so. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been in the Deshaun Watson thing for like 400 days, right? So when you look at them, the Saints trading away next year's 1st round pick, not being super active in the 1st round, now moving up to get 2, or not being active in free agency, now moving up to double their 1st round picks to add this top 20 selection, top 50 selection, top 100 selection, it goes to show you that the Saints truly believe that that 1st round pick that they traded to the Philadelphia Eagles next year is going to be a late 1st round pick, because they intend to compete in 2022. And having 16 and 19, and in my opinion, staying put at 16 and 19 will absolutely help them do that. They are right now, preseason, the 2nd best team in their division. They can help to close that gap right now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And all you got to do is win the division and you're in the playoffs, no question asked. And all of a sudden, once that happens, that draft pick is late. It is a late 1st round draft pick, and you're willing to move on from that. Okay, tomorrow, let's take a look at what it looks like if the New Orleans Saints package those 2 selections, 16 and 19, to trade up and grab Malik Willis in the top 10. And we'll also explore what it looks like for the Saints to try to hold on to one of those draft picks and move up into the top 10, which would be hard to do just with teams knowing that they have those. But we'll find out if we can make it work, and we'll do a full 7-round mock draft so that you know where the Saints select all told as well with that trade up. So we're going to get to all that tomorrow on Wednesday on another episode of Locked On Saints. I appreciate you as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Big thank you to those of you who have tuned into the show regularly. Big thank you to those of you who just now found the show. It's going to be a very fun offseason. So however many episodes you listen to every week, listen to one more, because the NFL draft is right around the corner, and it's only going to get crazier when you see the New Orleans Saints doing stuff like this. So make sure I'm your first listen every day. And for your second listen, go and check out that Locked On NFL Draft podcast. I'm sure they're going to do another mock draft here with the Saints updated 16, 19, the Philadelphia Eagles at 15 and 18. It's a frenzy. It's anarchy. Go and check it out. It's going to be a ton of fun. Eric Crocker, Ryan Tracy, they're going to walk you through all of it with another mock draft over at Locked On NFL Draft. We got all that, as always, for you every single Monday through Friday here. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day, and for everything you need in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.